Uh, Good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I'm very grateful for Tamar for inviting me. Before I start, I was asked to say that this shiur is in merit for shidduch for Chayalea Bas Yafa. No, sorry. For shidduch for Tauba Bat Dvora Ita Beila, and for the chasuna of Shoshana Bas Shaindel Malka Linz and Simcha Wolf ben Menachem Wolf, and also for Refuah Shlema for Levi Elchanan ben Tadia Yehudis. So once again, really a pleasure to be here and to meet all of you women. And Betzlacha Rabba for the Nexus School and all the shiurim that will be given here. So the topic for today is to talk a little bit about relationships, and especially relationships in light of a great change that's happening in the world and it's increasing more and more, which we call the rise of femininity. But before that, we're going to go a little bit into what makes Torah learning for women, or women learning Torah, a little bit different than men learning Torah, and this will lead us into our topic. So we're coming out of Parashat Yitro. In Parashat Yitro, just before the giving of the Torah, just as the people of Israel are coming to Mount Sinai, then Hashem commands Moshe. He says, "Kosoimer leveis Yaakov, v'saged livnei Yisrael." So you shall say to the house of Yaakov, and so you shall speak to the sons of Israel. Now, offhand, it sounds like, of course, like a synonym. It sounds like two ways of saying the same thing. It means the people of Israel, but as we all know, there's really no such thing as a synonym in the Torah. If something is said twice, it alludes to two things. And the very famous Perush that Chazal are very consistent about is that the first half, Tagid Levet Yaakov, that alludes to the women, teaching the women, and the second, Tomar Levet Yaakov, yeah, and the second, Tagid Livnei Israel, that alludes to the men. Why? Because Beit Yaakov, in two ways, it alludes to something more feminine. Beit is a feminine symbol, right? Ishto zo beito, that's how Chazal interprets when the Kohen Gadol is davening for his home. They say the Torah means his wife, and also Yaakov. He was a man, but the two names Yaakov and Israel, according to Kabbalah, Yaakov is more feminine in nature. The name, it's an attribute in relation compared to Israel. So Bet Yaakov would be the women, and then Bnei Israel. Again, for the same reason, Bnei is general, it could be everyone, but more particular, it's the men, and Israel is a more masculine attribute. So, just before the Torah is given, before we're just coming to Mount Sinai, we're standing at the bottom of Mount Sinai, the first thing, before all the event and the thunder and the lightning and all this, I'm just going to put I've got a sense of time. We're said that the Torah is given in two ways, using two different descriptions and two different verbs, to the women and the men. So two very interesting things are going on here. The first is the separation, that the Torah is one, it's one for everyone. That would be the pshat reading, that it's those two parts of the verse refer to all of the people of Israel together. But if we go beyond the pshat and we listen to the particulars, we see that there's a distinction to be made. It's as if women and men hear the Torah differently and they should be learned differently, and it's said even before the whole event begins. And the second, even more interesting thing is why women precede the men. It's the receiving of the Torah. In most occasions, men precede women. When humankind was created, it was Zachar v'Nekeva. Most incidents, the men are mentioned before the women. But not when we're coming to Mount Sinai. We're coming to Mount Sinai, and the Torah is given, there's a distinction made, and the women precede the men. And that's something very interesting to understand. So the Midrash gives three answers to why the women were preceded. Why did the women have to learn? It's as if they heard the Torah first, or Hashem or Moses sat down to teach the women first, or something of this nature. In any way, some way, they preceded the men. So the Midrash gives three answers. The first answer is that women are more zrizot lemitzvot. They have more alacrity. They're quicker in some ways to implement and to practice and to do the mitzvot. And men not so much. And then maybe if men would have been taught first, who knows what women would do. But then if the women are taught first, then they can use this time and do things while the men are learning their own things. That's the first thing. That's all it says. We have to understand what it means. So the first is more zrizot lemitzvot. Second reason why the women preceded the men is that the women educate the children, and so they have precedence because they educate the young children, and then while the men are learning, they can already start teaching the children maybe, and they have this high responsibility. And then the third and most interesting one goes like this. It says Hashem is learning, so to speak, from his mistakes. And in the beginning of the world, when he created Adam and Chava, first Adam and then Chava, according to the Pshat. And he also commanded first Adam and then Chava. And because Adam received the commandments first and Chava afterwards, for some reason this caused the sin that Chava sinned. If she would have been taught first, she wouldn't have sinned. Something in that space of time that Adam learned, that had received the commandment from Hashem, and Chava didn't, somehow made it so that she went and did something else. She found something else to do. She's not going to waste her time. It goes along a little bit with the first reason, that if they're quicker, it means that they're not going to waste their time and they're going to do something else that's interesting. If it's not Torah, maybe it's finding a smart snake to talk to and do something else. And that's actually, we saw this in Jewish history. If you learn a little bit about the history of the Haskalah movement and how it infiltrated the Jewish people, one of the main reasons was because the women were not studying Torah, and then they were bored. They wanted something to do. They have more quickness, and they can't afford to waste their time, and they want to fill the void. And if the void is not filled with Torah, then they'll go and speak to intelligent snakes, to the academia, professors, sophisticated professors, who recognize an intelligent student, and that's what the snake did with Chava. He looked at the two options, and he said, I have more to talk to with Chava, and Adam was speaking to Hashem somewhere, and so Hashem decided, I'm not going to repeat this mistake again, so to speak, and Ma'amad Har Sinai was the opposite. And that was exactly, by the way, this is very fascinating, because the whole Beis Yaakov network of schools began as a reaction to this exact phenomena. This is the verse it's coming from, right? Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov, that we need to fill the void with Torah. The women should learn first, even before the men in some way. And then, so that's something very interesting. We're just to start us off on this whole thing. That there's a distinction made and the women come first. And the reason is there's something more energetic or more quick, and that they would not stand an intellectual or spiritual vacuum. And for the men, maybe not so much. They could live in a vacuum for a little while, while the women are learning, and then so this is something very interesting, just as a starting point. Now, so this is just understanding what Beis Yaakov versus Bnei Israel and the preceding of Beis Yaakov to Bnei Israel. But what about the verbs? Tomar versus Tagid, Amira versus Haggadah. What's going on with these two verses? Because the verb is the more interesting thing in a way, because the verb tells us about the nature of this different kind of learning. So why is Tomar to the women and Tagid to the men? So here again, we're going back to the same midrash, and the same midrash is giving the following explanation. It's one explanation. It says, Amira is Rashei Dvarim. What is Rashei Dvarim? Rashei Dvarim is like the headings. It's like the main topics. Put it down into main topics, give the headings Rashei Dvarim. Whereas Haggadah is Dikdukei Dvarim. It's two very connected terms. Rashei Dvarim, the headings, versus Dikdukei Dvarim, all the little details, all the things that go below the headings, all the details that make up the topic. So this is the midrash. Rashei Dvarim versus Dikdukei Dvarim. So it sounds, and the exact wording of the midrash is Tomar לבית יעקב, תאמר לנשים ראשי דברים שהן יכולות לשמוע, the headings that they can hear, and תאמר, and תגיד לגברים, דקדוקי דברים, tell them the details of the דברים, of the things that they can hear. And the simple reading, that we're going to change in a minute, but the simple reading sounds like that the women can only get the headings and they can't get the details, but the men can also get the details. So the women, you give them only the headings, because that's as far as you can go. And the men, you can go further than that and also give the details. That's a simple reading of this midrash. We're going to reread it in a minute, but that's a simple reading. Now, if we go to the Mechilta, that's another explanation for the same pasuk, Ko tomar lebeit Yaakov v'tagid libnei Israel. The Mechilta adds another thing for tomar, and for the women talk, the women learning. The Mechilta says, Lashon raka. Use a soft tongue. Right? Speak softly, soft-spoken. It has to be more soft-spoken. When Rashi interprets this pasuk, he doesn't address this topic, this notion of Rashei Dvarim. He just says Lashon raka, but very beautifully he alludes to both the ideas that we have, the soft tongue versus the headings. He says, for the men, you should give two things. The tagid, the speaking, the haggadah to the men, is onashin v'dikdukin, the punishments and the details. So the punishment is the exact opposite of the soft tongue, the soft-spoken kind of teaching, is you tell the punishments. And the details are the opposite of the headings. So anyway, we have two things now. We have the soft-spokenness for the women learning, the soft-spokenness, and we have the headings. Now, going deeper, what exactly does Rashei Dvarim mean? It's not so clear what it means. We said headings, but it can be understood in two completely polar opposite ways. Completely two polar opposite ways of understanding what Rashei Dvarim means. Now, this is coming from a sikha from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that he made this distinction, but it's very clear that it can be made. And he says Rashei Dvarim can be interpreted in two polar opposite ways. One way is that it's like a simplification of the ideas, a simplification of the Torah. The Torah is very complex, the halakha is very complex, it has a lot of ideas and details and a lot of weight, a lot of scenarios and a lot of incidents and situations and clauses and all these details. And then the Rashei Dvarim would be like the bottom line. Would be, so let's sum it all up. And to sum it all up, we can have just a few lines to sum it all up, and this is what it means. Also has to do very much with practical halacha. So this is what you have to do with this. This is all the shakla and tara, this is all the talk, this is all the different ways of looking at it, but at the bottom line, this is the takeaway. This is what you need to know. And that's the first understanding of headings. And that goes along with the way we read the Midrash, that for the women, they can only hear the Rashei Dvarim. Don't confuse them with all these details, just tell them this. So that's one reading. But then there's another reading, another way of understanding Rashei Dvarim, polar opposite. It's not the bottom line, and it actually goes more along with the term, it's the headline. The headline is not the bottom line. The headline is the deep meaning, or the inner layer, or the gist, the deep idea that's behind this. The head, when you think about a headline or a heading, sometimes you read something and you don't even notice the headline because it's so separate. It's sort of floating above the text, and it gives a kind of aura, a sensation of what this is all about. And sometimes you can get lost in the details, and if you don't remember what the headline is, you totally miss, you don't see the forest for the trees. And the Rashei Dvarim in this reading is like the essence and the idea of what's going on here. It's not the bottom line of okay, so what does it mean practically? What do I have to do with this? It's the deep level that's harder to understand, and it's not visible on the surface. Usually when we talk about head versus body, and the body is more external, more goes to the outside, like body language. But the head is, the important thing about the head is what's inside the head, it's what's hidden in the head. So the head has to do with the hidden level of things. So here, Rashei Dvarim would be the hidden level of things. So now we almost have this three-level structure, and we have first Rashei Dvarim in the more elevated reading of this idea, which is the headline, the deep idea. Then we have going into the details. And then we have, so now Lemaise, what do I do with this? Boil it down to me, tell me what to do, and this is the bottom line, which is a feminine concept, and then a masculine concept, then a feminine concept again. Now, if we look at this, at this higher reading of what Rashei Dvarim is, it connects very beautifully to what does it mean of the soft spoken. Right? We had another, the Mechilta gave us another reading of what does it mean, Tomar lebeit Yaakov, not Rashei Dvarim, something else, Lashon Raka. So again, even this Lashon Raka we can now understand in two ways. If we're talking about the bottom line, then the bottom line is, forget all the details, this is what you have to do. Again, it's simplified, it's taking it down to making something very simple. So then you speak softly in the yeshiva when they're studying all the opinions and all that they're shouting. Right? They're shouting because they're arguing, because they're trying to understand. But once it becomes clear, you don't have to shout. You have to say very simply, this is the psak, this is the maskana, this is what you have to do. That's what it means, soft-spoken, if Rashei Dvarim is the bottom line. But if Rashei Dvarim is the headline, we're talking about a totally different kind of Lashon Raka. We're talking about something, if you want to say something deep, if you want to say something that's hidden, that is the inner meaning of things, you have to whisper it. There is a piyut written by the Arizal that many of us say on Shabbat Nun, the second Seudah, Asader li Seudata, right? And Asader li Seudata, it's this Aramaic full of Kabbalistic ideas, and one of the lines there says that there is talking about this certain level within godliness that's very deep, the highest level, and then it says, "V'yachazei lan sitrei de'it'amar bilchisha." He will show us his secret, a bit like seeing the voices. He will show us his secret, we will see the secret, de'it'amar bilchisha, that is spoken with a whisper, only with a whisper. Secrets are whispered. That's the nature of secrets. So regular secrets, you can reveal them and speak them out loud, and then they're no longer a secret. Someone tells the secret, shouts the secret, and now everyone knows the secret. It's not a secret anymore because it's been shouted. But deep secrets, real secrets, can never be revealed. Because if you shout them, you haven't really revealed them. Because it comes out as a shout, as if it's something so obvious, so clear, everyone can understand it. Everyone can say it, you can print it in the newspaper. But something that's deep, that's intimate, like emunah, and like the neshama, things that are really deep, or the inner meaning of something, if you really want to get it, you can only really get what it means if it's whispered. If it's shouted, if someone takes a book of Kabbalah and shouts it somewhere, nothing has really been revealed because nobody is understanding what's going on. Only when you whisper it, then you realize something deep is going on here. That's why when people become serious, they start whispering. When they start revealing the things that are precious to them. They wouldn't just talk about it in a regular way, they have to speak in a Lashon Raka. So this is a totally different whisper than the whisper that we said that's opposed to the limud, the way people shout in the yeshiva. And then you have clarity, it's a different opposite. Again, totally different kinds of whispering. The first whisper we talked about comes from things being very, very clear. I have a psak halacha, I have a maskana, I have something to tell you. It's the bottom line. So because it's so clear, there's no argument, I say it softly, I say it quietly, I don't shout, because there's no argument. But if we're talking about headlines, not bottom lines, the whisper is it comes from a sense of something that's the opposite of clarity, a sense of mystery. There's a mystery here, and it needs to be whispered, because then it remains a mystery, and you feel that you're in the presence of something you don't fully understand. Now the Torah has all these levels. It has this level of mystery. This isn't just a book of ideas, a book of laws. It's a book that Hashem has put himself into this. Hashem's infinite light somehow encapsulated into this text. So when you're touching the headlines, the Rashei Dvarim, there's a sense of mystery and awe and wonder, and something you can't fully understand. That's why you have to whisper that, and that's something feminine. And that also explains why the women precede the men, because even the Torah itself, as it comes, it starts with something very broad. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. That's very general. Lo echa Elokim achrim al panai. The entire concept of having first the 10 commandments, then all the other commandments, says first you start general. You start with basic, what is emunah, what is the opposite of idolatry, how to get a sense of where we are. And it's something infinite, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So that's the first level, and then you have all that. You have the intellectual level of all the dikdukim. That's more masculine, and then when you come down to the bottom line, let's do something with it. It begins to become feminine, and the order of the women preceding the men more alludes to the higher interpretation of Rashi Dvarim. So that's something really, really beautiful. We can even take out of this something for both men and women, because going back to the Pshat, Beit Yaakov, Bnei Israel, it's everyone, right? Just like Yaakov and Israel were the same person. And he was a man, so he had a feminine side and a masculine side. Yaakov was his feminine side, Israel was his masculine side. Same goes for all men and women. So we can say that when we're learning Torah, we need to go through the 3 stages. Each one, whether man or woman, has to connect to a feminine side, which is the side that listens to the whispers of the Torah. The Torah is whispering something very deep that we can't just talk about and understand, and then it's all clear. There's something deeper, and the feeling that let's try and listen to the inner layer of things. That would be the Rashi Dvarim in the high sense. That's more feminine. And then, again, each one of us has to move on to the masculine intellectual stage of dikdukim, trying to understand all the details and breaking it up. And there's no mystery. There's just a sense of trying to understand, figure things out, and breaking it down into all the details. And then again, there's something about the practicality of now let's do something with it. Let's not remain in the Beit Midrash. Let's take it into our lives. The bottom line, that again would be a feminine thing to do. And now we can go back to the Midrash and reread it in a beautiful way. And the Midrash now becomes that, again, first we read it as if it's saying, Tomar lebet Yaakov, tell to the women, Rashi Dvarim shehen yicholot lishmoa. Because that's all they can hear. And then tell the dikdukei dvarim to the men, because that's what they can hear. They can hear more. Not necessarily. We can say that both of them hear something that the other one can't hear. And both genders are a bit hard of hearing regarding the other thing. So the women get the Rashi Dvarim maybe more than the dikdukei dvarim, but it's very symmetrical. To tell to the men, tagid lebnei Israel, tell to the men the dikdukei dvarim, shehem yicholim lishma, because that's all they can hear. They don't have a sense of the deep headlines as much as the women do. So the men have more of a talent for the dikdukim, and the women have more of a talent for the Rashi Dvarim, and they need one another. It's not as if it's not like the first reading that the women could only get the bottom line, and then for the men you can go more and go into all the details. It's just something very symmetrical. It's not a hierarchy. It's totally different. That women have a talent to hear the Rashi Dvarim, and men have a talent to hear the dikdukei dvarim, and that's why they need each other so much, because the men may only see the trees and they lose sight of the forest, of the gist, of the deeper meaning, of the idea behind this, because they're lost in the details and the opinions and the points of view and connecting it. And then a woman can tell them, listen, this is what it's really about. That's the spirit of that's the Rashi Dvarim here. And of course the opposite as well. That the details and the fine tuning and the way it's structured and so on, the men can help the women. And of course, again, we can all go through this as we're advancing in our learning within us. Yeah, but of course, men and women are different in the sense that they're more connected to their own way of hearing or way of understanding or way of listening to the Torah, and then husbands and wives can learn together to have more appreciation of what the other side can give them. Before moving into the topic of relationships, we'll just answer one more. We'll connect this to another thing, where again the whispering motif appears. Another totally different topic in the Gemara. We're moving from the Midrash to the Gemara. It's in Bava Metzia. There's a debate between two sages. The debate is, should one listen to one's wife's advice? Big question. Should one listen to heed one's wife's advice or not? And we have two opinions that are very, very, very different. And the first opinion is absolutely not. No, no, don't listen to your wife at all. It'll only get you to really terrible places. In fact, the term used, I was debating whether I should say it or not, says, Kol ha'olech ba'atzat ishto nofel begehenom. You can't say it more radically than that. So be careful. Everything your wife tells you, do the opposite. That's one opinion in the sages. The other opinion says, no, no. There's an idiom, a widespread idiom in their days, that says, it sounds weird at the beginning, but it's very deep. It says, your wife is shorter than you are. You should bow down and whisper with her, which really means you should hear her whispering to you. Because the whole topic they're talking about is whether you should listen to your wife's advice. Not that you should speak to your wife, but it's what she's saying. So even the idea, the image of your wife is shorter than you may not even regard regular height. It may be the height of the voice. She doesn't speak as loudly as you. You have to bow down. You have to be more humble. You have to lower yourself and listen to the whispers. Because if you're talking loudly, you won't hear the whispers. And you do have to hear the whispers. So this idiom is given to advance the idea that one should listen to one's wife's advice. So the way it's solved there is very beautiful. We're not going to go into it, but we are going to say that it goes beautifully with our structure. If we're talking about Rashei Dvarim as bottom line, and without all the details and the process and the ideas goes, then this level in which it's just the man who's the mashpia and the woman is the mekabel, then if that is how it is, then maybe it's not wise for the man to follow his wife's advice because she's too practical, and maybe she doesn't have as wide a vision as he has. But if we're adding the higher perush, which is the headline, not the bottom line, the Rashei Dvarim in the higher sense, then here, of course, the woman becomes the mashpia for the man, because that's higher than the Dikdukei Dvarim. Again, it's Rashei Dvarim in the high sense of headline, and then Dikdukim, and then Rashei Dvarim in the sense of bottom line. So if we're talking about the higher two levels, here, the man should listen to his wife, because she can see something he can't. She can hear something. And beautifully, it's described as a whisper. It really goes beautifully together. Just as Tomar lebet Yaakov is Rashei Dvarim and Lashon Raka, so too here in this opinion that's coming in the debate whether one should listen to one's wife's advice, it says that your wife is whispering truths that are hidden from you, and you have to lower yourself, but it's really lowering yourself in order to hear something that's higher than you are. It's spoken in a soft voice, so you also have to lower your ego to listen to what your wife is whispering. And again, this whole thing is solved in a way that you can tell that some issues you should, some issues you shouldn't. It's not as if one opinion is pushed away, or they're integrated, like everything in the Torah. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. Chazal do their best to integrate different opinions. Just as our model integrates the two perushim of Rashei Dvarim, the higher one, the headline one, and the bottom line one. Now this all leads us to the topic of the rise of femininity and its implications for relationships and what to do with this. So throughout most generations, the simple reading of what we just said was the first reading we mentioned. That women don't understand as much as men. They can only understand the bottom line, the topics, boil it down, give the conclusion. And the men were studying, the women were not studying. The women are not obligated to study Torah, they're patur, but then this ptor, this exemption from the obligation to study Torah actually became an isur. And Chazal said that one shouldn't teach one's daughters Torah. But that isur, in recent generations, the past 100-some years, has been removed for the reasons that we mentioned. And now we have something that's happening in the world that's new, that is that women are learning, and they're learning very seriously sometimes and very deeply. And now this whole new perush that we had, that the Rashei Dvarim is the deeper level, the headlines on top, it's opening up. And it goes along with a lot of different things that are going on today, such as the whole idea, right, this whole level that's above the diktukim, that's above the details, the hidden level, the hidden layer, that's called pnimiyut Torah. the inner dimension of the Torah, which is Kabbalah and also Chassidut. The fact that all this is flourishing now is because that is more feminine wisdom. So it started out with just men. All the Hasidim were men. But as a kind of wisdom, as a way of learning the Torah, it's really more feminine in nature. And that's why women today are taking it in so energetically and so happily, and they're running for it. And I know from both me and my wife, we teach Chassidut, and and I teach in a school in Israel called Torah Tanef, it's Jewish psychology. It's really Hasidic school for Chassidut. And every year it's like this. So you open the new course, you open the school, and you have 5 times as many women coming as men. There's no comparison. The men think they know everything, maybe, I don't know. Or maybe they feel Chassidut isn't for them. And we're trying to figure it out why it's not working. The publicity, maybe change the design, whatever. But more women, radically more women are coming. 4 or 5 times as many. And why? Because this whole new level is opening up, and in this level, that there's something that this kind of learning is higher, and the women can maybe be the teachers of their husbands here, because they, again, like the whispers of the wife to the husband in that description from the Talmud. We have now women becoming, or having the potential to be mashpiot, and to learn more, and to teach more. And they can see something, they can learn something, maybe their man can't. And this relates to a phenomenon that we actually see worldwide. This isn't just of course in the Jewish world, it's taking on different forms. But we have something that's really become a thing for psychologists and sociologists and educators all over the world. That in many, many areas, women are now becoming better at what they're doing than men are. And also something in the area that used to be dominated by men. And this is a worldwide topic. It's a very huge topic, that men are dropping off school more than women. They're getting lower grades than women. And of course, then it comes down to relationships. You have relationships in which the women feel, and they don't just feel, there's also some objective truth to this, that they achieve more. They have more drive, they have more energy, they have more desire to learn more, to know more. They're not satisfied, they have more, just like we saw, they have more electricity, more zrizut. So outside the Jewish world, it's not zrizot lemitzvot, it's zrizot to other things. But in the Jewish world, it's zrizot lemitzvot, or to other things. It's like like we said, the nature abhors a vacuum, and also the women more abhor a spiritual or intellectual vacuum more than the men. And now we're really seeing this happening. And this has a very, very strong effect on many, many relationships, many women. And we see, again, my wife and I say this all the time, and my wife is also a counselor, and many women come to her with this exact same problem. She secretly, or not so secretly, somewhere in her heart, she looks down at her husband. She doesn't appreciate him very much. She feels that he's stopped at some point, advancing or growing, and she hasn't. And she's going more and more, and learning new things all the time. And she's going to those classes that we teach and other classes all over the world in the country. And the men aren't. And of course it's like a cycle, it's a circle, because then the more it happens and the more the women experience their husbands in this way, then their husbands become more closed up. And we see this in many, many different areas, and this is a big problem that we need to address. So what happens to relationships in light of the rise of femininity, and how do we solve this? So whenever we want to address something like this psychological issue or relationship issue, but we want to do it from a Torah perspective, the best thing to do would be to take a Torah story or a Torah topic and do it from there, starting from there, and then solve it all. And I should say at this point, by the way, it's really connected to this whole thing, that this whole shiur is really based on a shiur that my wife gave a few months ago, that as I was preparing for this, and I was talking to her about it, she says, I have this shiur to read it, it's really mamash free, and I read it, and it was... So this is really a demonstration of this idea. So I took it, and you have to make it your own a little bit, but it's really coming from her, and it's really, it's all coming from Hashem, yeah. But it came through her, and the choosing of this story, it's just perfect. So it's a story. We're going to tell a story, and it's a story some of you for sure know, some of you may not know. whether you know it or not, it's always good to repeat the stories and reread them, and we're going to reread it very carefully, because every detail here tells us something very deep. And it's an amazing story, and it's amazing in how much it's relevant to our generation and everything we just described, which is the situation that couples find themselves in. Of course, it's different from story to story, from couple to couple, but it's absolutely, we're seeing this in many different versions and levels and degrees in our generation. The woman feeling that she is advancing more than her husband, and that creates a marital crisis. So this is exactly what this story is about. It may have been unique in its generation, but now we're realizing how amazing the eternal of the Torah is, that it's something that was very strange. You wouldn't think about it. Who would even have that kind of situation back then? But it happened. It happened once, or a little bit more than once. But now it's becoming super relevant to our generation. So it's a story about Rabbi Meir, the great Tana, one of the greatest Tanaim ever to have lived. He also had a wife who was very interesting. She was a Talmidat Chachamim, Bruria. She's not mentioned in the story, but maybe she had something to do with it. We know that she influenced him in other areas. The famous story that she told him to pray, not that his wicked neighbors would die, God forbid, but that they would do tshuva, and she listened to her, and that's what happened. So that's Rabbi Meir, and he also had a special connection with Elisha ben Avuya. He was his teacher. Elisha ben Avuya left him, stopped being frum, and he remained in contact with him and still believed in his soul. Tocho rimon matzah, he found a pomegranate, and he took the inside, threw away the outside, could take the Torah out of Elisha ben Avuya. So one of the greatest sages to have ever lived, buried in Tveria. So the story goes like this. It's Erev Shabbos. It's Leil Shabbos. Shabbos is coming in. And every Leil Shabbos, every Friday night, Rabbi Meir is giving a drasha at the shul. Before Shabbos, before the people go back to their homes, he gives a drasha. This particular Friday night, he gave a very long drasha. It was longer than usual. Must have been very complicated, a lot of details. And he opened it up, and the people remained. And among them was a woman. The woman really liked listening to those drashot. And very interestingly, her husband was not there. He was at home. So immediately we have something that we find relevant to this topic. Again, this is Torah. It could be other areas. But Torah makes it more poignant that he was at home. He didn't listen. He didn't come to listen to the drasha. But she was there at the shul listening to the drasha. But it was a very long drasha. And by the time she came back home, the candle blew out. It was evaporated, how do you say? Extinguished. The Shabbos candle extinguished, which is a very, very deep symbol. Because we have the two candles, it's the husband and wife, it's their relationship, it's their love, it's their bond. By the time she came back, the candle was extinguished. And he asked her, "Where were you?" He was waiting and waiting and waiting, and the candle blew out. Maybe it's his patience. Maybe it's his trust in the marriage. Maybe it's something, the way their souls are connecting. Maybe it's been going on for some time. It's not the first time, maybe. Maybe it was just crossing the boundary. "Where were you?" She says, "I listened to the drasha of the Rav at the shul." It was a long drasha. He says, "You can't come into this house until you go back to whoever gave this drasha." His name isn't mentioned. Maybe he doesn't even know who Rabbi Meir is. You go back and you spit on the person who gave the drasha. And otherwise you can't come into the house. Now we have several versions. This is actually the story appears 3 times. Twice in the Midrash, once in the Yerushalmi Talmud. And it's slight variations. So one version, she goes to the Beit Midrash and she doesn't know what to do. Goes back to the Beit Midrash like he told her. And the other one, she doesn't come back home for 3 weeks. A week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks. It's detailed in that version. So 2 different versions. The second one far more severe than the first. And he's still adamant that he's not forgiving. He's unforgiving. She will not have her back. And she's also stubborn because she's not doing what, or in any way, and she wouldn't do it. How could you do it? And another version also says that the man was clownish. He was a clown. Leitzan, leitz, moshav leitzim. Right? We shouldn't be at the first Zalm. He was a leitz. She says, that's also something interesting. She was a very intelligent woman who could stay at this long drasha and listen and understand and wait and forget about coming home, or not forget, but still not come home, because she wanted to follow everything, and she couldn't come home without listening for the entire drasha. But he is, according to one of the versions, he's a leitzan. So if we're taking things to the extreme, we can understand them better. We can understand situations which are not as extreme, if we understand the extreme situation. He was boorish. He was cynical. So the one version is 3 weeks that she doesn't come home. The other version that she's going back to the Beit Midrash. And then in both versions, the one that when she stays away for 3 weeks, her friends, her female friends, tell her, "Come on, it's enough. Let's go to Rabbi Meir and we'll find a solution somehow." And they're going to Rabbi Meir. The other one is when she's at the Beit Midrash, but then Rabbi Meir is coming there. Why? Because in both versions he has Ruach HaKodesh. He understands what's going on, and he says very clearly that he has Ruach HaKodesh. And he understands what happened. He also understands that he was a part of it. And of course, there's something also very deep going on here, because there's a little bit of adultery, a subtle, tiny little bit of adultery here, because this is why it's in Masechet Sotah in the Jerusalem Talmud, because in some way she's preferring the Rav to the husband. In some way, even so, for the length of time that the candle was put out, was over. If she remained at that moment, there was a tiny little bit of it, and that's where the husband felt it, and the husband knew that, and he felt humiliated. And so, either way, Rabbi Meir has Ruach HaKodesh, and then when he's there in the Beit Midrash, or 3 weeks later when the women come alongside her, he suddenly says, "Oh no, I have something in my eye. I have this illness in my eye." And then he says something really incredible. We don't know this from our reality. Maybe it exists in Africa. Maybe it existed back then. He says, "I want a woman to whisper in my eye." Because they had this kind of medicine, a remedy, that the woman would come to the certain organ of the body and would whisper something that would heal it. And it's very obvious that they have it, it's normal, and everyone has it. And he says, does someone here know how to whisper to an eye? To heal the eye? So again, the whisper motif comes back. This is amazing. The whisper motif is coming back to us in this way. And then either she says, "Yes, I can do it," or her friends tell her, "Come on, this is your situation, go there and whisper," and then spit in his eye a little bit. So enough that you can tell your husband that you did it, and you can come back and we'll solve this whole tragedy. And then again, several versions. One is she's coming up. She says, "I can do it," and she's coming up. One, she does it. The other one, then suddenly she's in fear. She's standing in front of him. She was going to do it, but now she can't do it anymore. And then he tells her, "Please whisper in my eye and spit in my eye and do it 7 times. Don't do it just once. Do it 7 times." And she does. At first she doesn't want to, but then he insists that she do it. So one version she does do it without. The version that it takes place the same night, she does it immediately. But then he tells her. Either way, he's adding. He's telling her do it 7 times, or it's not 7 times, but he's the one who told her to do it. So either way, he's increasing whatever she's doing. She's fearful. She's not so fearful. Maybe it's the versions are the differences, like the 3 weeks versus the 1 night are so big. Maybe it was 2 different stories even. Who knows? Maybe it happened more than once. So anyway, he tells her, "Spit 7 times in my eye." And she does so. And then he tells her, "Go back to your husband and tell him you asked me to do it once and I did it 7 times. And she goes. And we don't hear anything about the relationship beyond this. And then his students tell him, "Rabbi, how did you allow her to do such a thing? It's the Kvod Torah. You're a rabbi, and you're so important, and how could you do this?" And he says, "Am I more important than Hashem? Hashem said, in the case of the sotah, that I should have my name erased in the water, so that there would be shlom bayit between the husband and wife. And I am doing the same thing. I'm erasing my own name, my own dignity. I'm letting go of my dignity in order that they have shlom bayit. And that's the end of the story. In one version, they tell him, we should have taken that husband and given him and beat him to have his wife come back. That's really what he deserved. Not you deserve to be spat on. He deserved it to have lashes of malkut. So that's the end of the story, but we still have to figure it out, because it's very, very unclear what kind of shlom bayit this kind of thing does, and how it really solves things. But the more we think about it, the more we realize that Rabbi Meir did something incredibly ingenious, and ingenious in several levels simultaneously. And we'll try to break it up. And each level will teach us something about situations that we encounter in our generation today. So we have to follow this very carefully, and it's all really in the story. We just have to listen. It's whispered, right? The Agadot of Chazal, there's the details. And then there's what now we have to listen to the Rashei Dvarim. So it's we have to go deeper and listen to what the story is whispering. It's just a question of opening it up. So let's go step by step. What did Rabbi Meir do to the couple when he told the wife, please spit in my eye and do it even 7 times? So the first thing he did several things here. But the first thing, very obvious thing that he did, was that he respected the husband's wish to be respected. The husband felt he wasn't respected enough. He felt humiliated. He felt cheated on in a way. He felt she preferred the Rav to him. And because he was humiliated, he wanted to restore his dignity. And on the surface, he doesn't deserve any respect. He's boorish, he's clownish, he's stubborn. He tells her to do something almost impossible. Go and spit in the face of that Rav. Maybe even it's such a destructive state of mind that he's in, that deep down he's asking her to do something impossible because really he doesn't want her to come back at all. What does it mean that you ask your wife, do this impossible thing and then you come back? If not, that really, maybe you don't want her to come back at all. You're looking for an excuse to break the marriage. So on the surface, he doesn't deserve any respect. There's something a little bit violent about him, the way he asks you to spit at the Rav. There's something that he's not studying Torah, she is, and he isn't. He's extremely stubborn, especially the 3-week version. But Rabbi Meir doesn't care about all this. He says, no. Everyone deserves respect. And it has nothing to do with how they are on the surface. It's just like my Rav, Elisha ben Avuya. On the surface, everyone is boycotting him, but I'm not. Because I want him to do tshuva one day. And I believe in his soul. And the only way someone could do tshuva is if you're melamed zchut, if you're favorable to them, and you think about them favorably. Rabbi Nachman has a very famous Torah that he says that he takes the verse, Od me'at ve'ein rasha, hitbonanta al mekomo ve'enenu. Soon there shall be no wicked man. Look at where he is and you'll see that he disappears. That's the pshat reading. It's a pasuk from Tehillim. But he says, every person, even the worst rasha in the world, you should try and find od me'at ve'ein rasha, the little thing, od me'at, a little tiny thing in him, where regarding that thing, he's not a rasha. Od me'at ve'ein rasha. It's a Hasidic reading of this verse. There's no way that the worst person in the world doesn't have this point of zchut. You have to find it and focus only on that. You're not blind. You see that he's a rasha, but you focus on that. And you only echo that back. And then you're helping him psychologically, mystically. The more you look at him favorably, the more he'll be able to do tshuva. And Rabbi Meir understands that it doesn't matter how bad the husband is, you have to have a good eye. That's ayin tova. And so the first thing he does when he says, I'm willing, spit on me, do what he said. That's what he's doing. He's saying, you should respect his wish. As crazy as it may sound, Why? Because it's not that every wish should be respected, but the idea that behind this is that he needs to be respected, and maybe, just maybe, he became so boorish and so clownish. What happened for this couple when they got married? How were they? Was it the same thing that she was studying Torah and he wasn't? Probably not. So probably either they started out not frum and then she's doing tshuva and he's not. So she's going to the shiurim and he's not. Or they started out frum but he got tired. But maybe there's a deterioration here because maybe she's disrespectful to him in some way, or she's letting him feel that she feels superior to him. And that is sure to make him worse and worse and worse. So in order to reverse all this, Rabbi Meir says, go and we have to respect his wish for respect. That's the first thing to do. Which really is all about the woman also connects. So now let's go to the next step actually. The next step would be that also he's teaching the wife a little bit of a lesson. Because he's almost telling the wife, you like me too much. You like my shiurim too much. So now you have to go through this process of spitting at me in order to remind yourself of what's ikar and what's tafel, of who your husband is. Again, there's a subtle, tiny little bit of speck of adultery here. So it's trying to erase that by saying you have to think lowly of me in order to think more highly of your husband. So that's another thing. He's teaching the wife something also. He's giving both these ideas have to do with teaching the wife something. He's also teaching the husband in a minute. We'll see this also. But he's teaching her, he needs to be respected, even if he doesn't deserve any respect. And his students also say, we should be beating him up. And he's teaching everyone, no, that's not how he works. And then the second is, you have to spit on me, and then you have to remind yourself of, you wouldn't spit at your husband, right? And you're only doing this because he's telling you, and I'm telling you. You have to connect to the fact that you need your husband. You have to go back to him. By spitting on me, by lowering me, you're a little bit elevating him. You're connecting to the fact that you need him. Maybe the fact that you didn't feel how much you need him in a certain level. Maybe you're more clever than he is. You can study, you can follow midrasha and he can't. Or you have the koach to stay through midrasha and he can't. He can't even be bothered to come. Yeah, that all may be true. But there are other things, if you're connected to yourself, you feel that you do need him. And maybe he became so bad because he didn't feel needed. Because many psychologists who deal with men's psychology will tell you that the most important thing for a man is to feel needed. It's something very serious. And the other way around, if a man doesn't feel needed, it's the worst thing he can experience. If he feels he has no purpose, that he's not helpful, that he's not needed, that he's not vital to whatever's going on, that someone needs his abilities and his talents, it could destroy him. It's the number one reason for suicide among men is that if they get fired from their job and they can't find another job because they feel useless. And the one thing that elevates them more than anything is that they feel needed. And if you don't feel that you need your husband and you're giving off this feeling, then he would become worse and worse. You think you're just acknowledging the reality, but you're making reality worse than it was. So spit on me and go back to him and show him you need him and you have to, and you can't stand to be a fourth week or another night with that. You have to go back there. Second thing that he does. So the first is saying, although he doesn't deserve respect, we should respect him, and that, well, maybe, maybe, just maybe he'll do tshuva, because for sure he won't do tshuva if we don't respect him. The second is that he's teaching her to also something that you maybe crossed a line when you stayed in the drasha. Third thing that he's doing, that's one of the most surprising things. The fact that he's erasing his name and erasing his identity and is willing to be spat on and 7 times means that he also feels a little responsible. He also needs a little bizayon, a little humility. It's a little bit his fault, and he knows this. He's involved. He can't ignore it. Maybe his drasha should have been so long. Even if it was just all husbands, that are going back to their wives, not their wife who's going back to their husband, that's also something you should be careful with, because the women are waiting at home. Nobody likes to leave the lasha in the middle. It looks inappropriate. So he has a little bit of responsibility here. He needs a little bizayon to do his own tshuva. And we know this from all the great tzaddikim, that they knew that whenever something happened to them, they realized that it's really Hashem, like David the Melech, that, I forgot his name now, who cursed him and shouted at him, and Shimi ben Gera. And he said, no, it's Hashem shouting at me and cursing at me. And he's just a messenger. So he was saying, I also need to, I have Ruach HaKodesh, but maybe I turn the blind eye to the spouses at home. And I need to do my cheshbon nefesh. And then the final and fourth thing that he's doing here, and this is like almost a reverse of the first, but it balances out the first. In a way, imagine the husband who vindictively said, go and spit on that rabbi's face. And then imagine her coming back and said, I did so. And I did so with hidur. You asked for one time, I did it 7 times. So on the one hand, the first thing he would do is he would quiet his anger and his vindictiveness. But immediately afterwards, what would happen? He would feel ashamed. In a subtle way, he's also being taught a lesson. By doing it even 7 times as strongly as what he wanted, it's as if saying, is this what you wanted? Is this really what you wanted? And so he's really telling him, he's causing him to feel ashamed also, on a more simple level. He's showing him how to accept humiliation. The Rav is willing to be humiliated. He's saying, yeah, spit in my eye, I don't care. And he's really telling him, he said, that's how you should, when you were at home and waiting, and the candle was dying out, and she wasn't coming, what did you feel? You felt that she was spitting in your face. That's what you felt. That's why you wanted her to spit on my face. That's the only reason. You felt that she was spitting on your face, and then you couldn't take it. So I'll teach you. We have to accept the humiliations we get. It's an important part of married life. You're married, you want to know what marriage is? Marriage is you're going to get humiliated. But you have to take it. You have to take it like a man. Like a man in the deep sense. You have to take it in a way that you're connected to Hashem at that moment. We know that when Chava was created, it says Ezer Nigdo, and then Chazal say, if the man married, she's Ezer, she's his help, she's helping him. But if Lo Zacha, if he doesn't merit, then she is Lenigdo, she would fight him and argue with him. And so you would think it's like a comedy and a tragedy, and like, now it's a good day or a bad day, or a good wife or a bad wife, but it's not like this. Because the word zacha is like to purify or to embellish or to make something more clean, more pure. Lezakech. Zacha, to have merit, is to be mezukach. So if you're not mezukach, you need to be more purified. You have ego, and you're selfish, and you're concerned about your own dignity in a bad way. Then you will get humiliations. That humiliation itself will make you more mezukach. It's not like Zacha Ezer, he merits, she's an Ezer, he doesn't merit. It's all for the good. Because if you don't merit, then the fact that she's against you, negdo, that your wife is shouting at you and angry at you, that makes you more zoche, more zach, more pure. And if you realize this, if you don't argue back or shout back or push her out of the house, if you realize that you had something to learn that night that she didn't come back. So it wasn't beseder of the Rav, and it wasn't beseder of the woman. But why did you have this? Why did you have to go through this? Because it reflects something about you, that your wife isn't so eager to come back home. You have to learn something here also. And you should have taken it, and I'm demonstrating it by accepting that I be humiliated. I'm teaching you that whenever you feel humiliated, you should see that this is a mirror that's showing me that I have to work on something, that maybe my wife is disappointed or bored, or I'm not bringing enough Torah into the house, and then she's out looking in some other places, and what have I gotten us into, and how did I make this happen? And so he's also, on the surface, we would just read the story, we think he's sort of flattering the husband and favoring the husband and going all the way, and you know, humoring this terrible whim of the husband. But he's also teaching him something also. Is this what you wanted 7 times that you would do this? He would feel ashamed, and then he would realize, he said, oh my God, the Rav accepted those things, and I didn't accept that she was late for home. And maybe, so he's doing something ingenious. He's teaching something to everyone, to the woman, and to the man, and to himself, and to the students looking, and saying that he gives, that's the whole bottom line, is that Gadol HaShalom, Hashem was willing to erase his name in order to make peace. And so am I willing to erase my name. And really, all of us should do so, because he's telling, again, the wife is also a bit stubborn. And in awe, too much in awe of the Rav, and not enough in awe of the husband. So everyone should erase their name a little bit. So what do we get out of all this? So this, I think, is an amazing story for our generation, because in different ways, not as radically, not always in Torah context, many different contexts, this is a true thing that's happening today, is that many women feel a little bit like this woman. Again, to a certain extent, different from case to case. But sometimes they feel maybe it's more interesting outside, or it's more, and again, the problem was not that she went to hear the drasha. That's another important thing. The problem was that she overstayed. The fact that she wants to hear the drasha is incredible, wonderful. That would want to also go and listen to the drasha. But the fact that she overstayed, that the candle was extinguished, that line was crossed, that's not good. And everyone has to learn something. So what she has to learn is that she is setting priorities right, and is finding this combination of accepting the fact that right now my husband is not so much into this kind of learning that I am excited about, and I don't have maybe a companion in this. And that's not so bad. You know, maybe if you whisper, maybe also, if you're angry at him, for sure he won't be that way. So you have to be connected to this and whisper it. Right? Because we said the deeper secrets, the Rashei Dvarim, can only be whispered. So go back home and whisper it, and gradually it'll seep in. But you have to be there. You have to be connected to the fact that you need him, that ultimately he's more important than the Torah that you're learning. That ideally you would want to connect everything, and it's possible. Just don't overstay, don't exaggerate. Make sure the candle at home isn't extinguished as you're learning the Torah. And then if you do so, if you listen to the drasha and come home in time, and the candle is still lit, and then you can whisper in the candlelight what you learned in the class, and your husband feels respected and doesn't feel humiliated, he could also learn from you. Because you would say it kindly, you would say it soft-spoken, in a soft-spoken manner, that he would feel purposeful, he would feel needed, and then he also become a vessel to learning the Torah that you're able to learn right now, that he is not there yet. So amazing story for our generation, with a lot of details. We have to, again, listen to all the little whispers between the lines of the story, and take it to heart, and take it to our homes, to our lives. And once again, I wish you all a great, I was about to say winter, as I'm coming from the winter. Have a wonderful season, and B'atzlacha rabba with Nexus and the schools, and thank you so much.